Retired Sergeant Don Schoenfeld, thanks for coming in and talking to us about this. Take us back 18 years and start from when you got that phone call that a newborn had been stolen from one of our local hospitals.
It was 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. My homicide team and I were working 4 to midnight. I literally walked in the office and dropped my keys on the desk, and before I could sit down, the phone rang. And it was dispatch informing me that there had been a baby stolen from the hospital, that the hospital, all the perimeter was locked down, officers were searching cars before anybody could leave. So my team and I immediately got up and responded to the hospital, and when we got there, the officers outside were doing what they needed to do. I entered into the security area of the hospital, and it was pretty chaotic. Well, it was so fresh. It only happened just a few minutes earlier, and just everybody was running everywhere trying to see if they could look and see if they could find this baby. So after a few minutes, a man walked up to me and asked me could he help, and it turned out it was an FBI agent. And he said, the rest of my squad is on the way, including my supervisor. So when we kind of put our heads together after a few minutes, I sent one of the detectives upstairs to interview the mother and whoever else might have been in the room at the time. And we started the process of coordinating a room-to-room, floor-to-floor, building-to-building search, which took hours, and that was also to include the parking garages and all the parking lots. Very prolonged search. We started looking at security cameras. Of course, in 1998, they obviously weren't what they are today, and you couldn't watch them any other way but in real time. So to try to find somebody real time and try to find out whether or not they had cased the hospital prior to the time of the abduction was going to be a very long, time-consuming thing to do. So we continued on with the search, and that took probably 6 to 8 hours to complete. And in the meantime, we're trying to get information out to the media. We are putting bolos out, although we just had what turned out to be the sketch of the person. Unfortunately, we were told that they thought they'd seen the person looking in the nursery window. That camera for that window would have picked up a face, but it was non-functional at the time.
Had someone broken it, or it was just not working?
It was just not working.
Wow. So
we just started collecting any information that we could get. We reached out to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The FBI started putting their other resources in place. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement sent agents to assist. And we just started this long, intensive process of trying to find a live baby. I mean, a baby is the essence of helplessness and innocence, and you have to do whatever you can do to find that child. And we ended up getting every lead but the right lead until now.
It amazes me how much detail you remember about this case.
Well, you know, a lot of people remember where they were on 9/11. I remember exactly where I was standing when that first plane hit the tower. This is one of those things in a person's career. I'm sure none of us on the team that I was a supervisor of forgets the date and the time of when this occurred and what was going on at the time. It was very, very intense. There was a lot of stress. There was a lot of pressure. A lot of it was self-imposed because we had to find that baby. And as we went through the next few days, when it got to the following week, we were provided officers and detectives from patrol, other detective units, other FBI agents, task force people, FDLE, and we were literally screening hundreds of leads a day, myself and an FBI agent, and determining what needed to be done with them and passing them out to about 30 officers and detectives and agents every morning. We had a morning briefing every morning and we passed out leads every morning.
Did you have children at the time? And
I did.
I'm wondering, did it ever become personal to you? I don't know if there was a point where you spoke with the missing baby's mother or at any point, or did you not let it get personal on purpose?
If you let it get personal, I guess in a way it's personal because you are tasked with the responsibility of another human life, and you want to do everything you can to get that person back to their family. You can't let it get too personal because you get bogged down in that and you can't move forward and you can't keep moving and you can't do the job. So from that perspective, and we had other homicide cases to work, but we had a potentially live baby, and that was priority above all else. It had to be. So we continued to search for her. We had leads that went all over the country. Of course, in most of those cases, the FBI would facilitate getting those leads handled. I'll remember one specific lead that came out of Connecticut that was just a phone call to me from a sergeant in Connecticut saying that they thought they might have had the baby, that somebody had walked in to get the child seen in a clinic, and one of our bulletins was in the clinic. And the circumstances were suspicious enough that they called Child Services in Connecticut in and had them hold the baby, and they actually got us a DNA sample. They handed it to a airline pilot, and he handed it to us when he had landed in Jacksonville. And we took that DNA sample to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Crime Lab, and in less than 48 hours, we determined that it was not the child. And of course, there was a letdown. There was a disappointment. It really sounded like it was the lead we were looking for, but obviously it wasn't.
And when something like that hits you and you realize you are now back at square one,
you just keep going. You don't stop, you don't slow down, because there's still leads coming in. That lead was probably a couple of months into the investigation. I don't remember exactly the time period, but you just keep going. I mean, most of the leads for that case we got in the first 6 months to 18 months, over 2,000. I heard a figure the other night that said about 2,500. Probably the majority of those, I'd say as much as 2,200 maybe, were before I left homicide in 2002. But that's just not a case you forget. And I'm very pleased to know that there was an ending to it, that regardless of what was done, regardless of what the justice system does in all of this, she's alive. And that's the most important thing. That's what we always hoped the outcome would be.
Did you think we would see that day, or did you think she was gone? I remember when I covered it as a reporter, I was sure in my mind that she was gone forever.
You're never sure one way or the other. You hope. I have to say that I probably had my doubts for a period of time, but then those doubts can't get in the way of continuing on with the investigation. They can't, because you can't slow down from that. You have to keep going. And I can say that my homicide team, the FBI agents that were assigned to us, we had an FBI profiler, and the FBI agent in charge of the violent crime squad at the time was a tremendous help to me, because he had handled something similar to this in another part of the country a few years before. So he had some experience with this, and none of us had ever handled the kidnapping of a live baby before that was just hours old out of a hospital room.
So that was Mike Hurd.
It was Mike Hurd, and he was a tremendous help for months and months to come. And then of course we worked with a FBI profiler, and as it turns out, that was a stranger abduction as far as we know right now, based on what I've seen in the news.
So where were you when you got the news that they had found?
I was at home. I was working in my yard, and a friend from back in those days in the homicide office called me. It was my former lieutenant, Mark Foxworth, and he said, they found Kamiya. And I said, don't mess with me. And he said, no, they found her. And probably several of my neighbors heard me yell, what? I was stunned and pleased. I mean, obviously, this child has been found, and she's been found alive 18 years later, but still alive.
Do you have questions now? Like, are you curious about some things? Everybody has questions, but what is a retired sergeant in homicide curious about?
Well, I mean, I would love to know from the person that took her exactly how she did it. I mean, we all have some idea of that, but I'd love to know the specifics about that. But, you know, I'm no longer there. I am retired, and I know who the detectives are that are handling this, and they will put every bit of effort, as much effort into it today as we did back then. I know them, and I know they'll do a good job.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you so much, Sergeant Don Schoenfeld. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you.